Hello, this is Howard Owens, publisher of the Batavian. We're doing another candidate interview. This time we have Beth Parlato on, and let's meet her. Beth, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for having me, Howard.
Appreciate your time. So, as I was explaining, I'm going to ask some questions kind of about, what you believe about government and policy, and get your thoughts. And so all the questions are pretty much the same for all the candidates.
Okay.
So with that in mind, let me start off with a very foundational question. Do you believe the following statement is true? All people are equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely.
Do you believe that government exists to secure those rights?
Yes.
Do you believe that the framers of the Constitution intended to create a federal government as opposed to a national government, and that authority not granted explicitly to the federal government is reserved to the states?
Yes.
Do you believe that the framers intended Congress to have greater authority than the executive branch?
No, I do not. I believe that all of the branches in government are checks and balance on each other, and they should have equal authority.
Okay. If all people have inalienable rights, at what point in the human life process does a human become a person with equal rights?
Okay, so you're getting to the life issue. I'm a believer that a person has rights when they are a baby in the womb. I believe those are the most important and most vulnerable citizens of our society, and that a baby in the womb should be protected.
Is there some point at which they are a person with rights at some point in the womb, or at what point does that happen?
Right. Well, I know that, here in New York State, our government has said that a baby does not have rights until the baby is actually born. And even if that baby is born alive, but the intention was to have been an aborted baby, that baby doesn't have any rights. I don't agree with that. I believe that we have to protect the babies in the womb. My personal belief is I am pro-life from conception through natural death.
Is that based on a scientific belief or purely a religious moral belief?
You know what? I think it's based on both. Back in 1973, when we had Roe v. Wade, we didn't have the scientific and technology that we have now with the type of sonograms that are done and the type of technology that we use to even hear a baby's heartbeat. And there's technology that hears a heartbeat 8 days from conception. So that's scientific. So do I believe, so to me, it's both. I mean, I am a Christian. So, my foundation and how I live my life, that's my foundation. But scientifically, it has also been proven this many years forward since Roe v. Wade that we are picking up babies' heartbeats within days of conception. So I do not buy the argument that a lot of the governments use when it's that it's not a person until viability.
So looking at it scientifically, and going back to John Locke, who was very influential on our founders and his thinking about personhood, and his original phrase was not pursuit of happiness, it was property, and that property is our ability to what we can do with our minds. That's where free speech flows from. So those kind of rights, do you think that is there some point where a baby is able to, form thoughts and think that they get those rights, or you just think that that's not essential to having those rights?
No, I think that it's inherent. I mean, we were granted. It's inherent in our government. It's inherent in our foundational system of how the founders set up. You read it from the very beginning. You asked me if I believed in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life. Life is the first thing. And I believe in life. And I believe that as soon as we start valuing life in our society, whether it's a baby in the womb, whether it's a person with disability, or whether it's a person who is elderly and maybe suffering from dementia or other illnesses that the elderly suffer, I believe that we have got to value life from conception until natural death. And we do not value life in this society. We see what's going on. I mean, you and I are just watching on TV what's been going on over the last 3 days. We have lost valuing life. We have lost, we've lost respect. Human decency. Our country is in chaos. When I entered this race back on July 29th of 2019, there was no way I could have predicted what is going on with COVID and now with the deaths and the riots and everything else going on. I mean, we're in chaos.
A bit. So the Declaration of Independence also talks about government looking after people's safety and happiness and looking after the public good. The preamble of the Constitution talks about government looking after the general welfare of the people. What is the government's role in ensuring health, safety, and well-being for every American?
I think that the government's role is limited. That our country was founded on the notion of limited government. And what has happened is our government has grown so big, and there's a lot of things to blame for that. But one of the things that I blame of how our government has gotten so big, and it was not the intention of our founders, is career politicians. And I'm not blaming it on one party over the other. I'm blaming it on all parties. When you get to a state house or you get to the federal government, you become comfy right there, and you start being beholden to the bureaucracy and to the special interests and to the lobbyists. And so what's happened is you're actually contributing to the growth of government. So you may go there with the intention of the idea of limited government, but you're actually contributing to the growth of government. So I think that our government has grown so big, and my personal belief is when government gets their hands on something, it's not always the best. Government is not always the most efficient and not always the most effective. So I'm a true believer in limited government. I'm a true believer in individual liberty.
You talked about how when politicians, whoever they are, may talk about limited government, when they get to Congress, get to Washington, they actually contribute to bigger government. How would you avoid contributing to bigger government?
Yep. Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to be true to yourself and be a principled leader, and you have to not be beholden to the lobbyists and to the special interests. And I think that the difference is the career politicians, they keep climbing the ladder to build their political futures. And when that's all you know, and you're so concerned with building your political future, you're going to stop working for the people. If you may not have ever worked for the people, but you're really only going to be working for yourself and your political future. I have zero desire for a political career. I already have a career. I have zero desire for a political future. My goal is to be a doer and get something done. So that's how it's done. I also signed the term limits pledge, and I know a lot of politicians say they sign it, but it's only a mere signature for them. They don't adhere to it. I think that it's super important to get politicians term limited out, because then they're not, you actually have that checks and balances with being beholden to the lobbyists, special interests, and bureaucracy.
Healthcare remains a major issue for a lot of Americans, a concern for a lot of people. What is your plan to ensure that every American receives proper health care?
I'm one that does agree that health care needs to be reformed. I'm not a believer in the Affordable Care Act. I think that when the Republicans had the House and the Republicans had the Senate and the White House, that they should have replaced and repealed it, and they failed us. They failed the American people. That didn't happen. But I have to say, I'm not a supporter of government-run healthcare. I don't believe it works. I mean, we don't have the time to get into specifics. So I'm just going to give you a very general idea. I don't believe in that. I wouldn't support that. I believe government has got to remain privatized. I think that we need competition between markets, even interstate competition. If I can get a better plan that serves my family in Ohio, there should be no reason why I can't do that. I think it can drive down costs. I think we could actually have better quality health care, and it can also drive down the cost of prescriptions. Because that's a major issue, is the cost of prescription drugs.
Do you think that wealth or income inequality should be an issue that conservatives should be concerned about?
As a human being, we're all concerned about it. I mean, I am absolutely concerned about those that, that have less than the rest of us. I am concerned about that. But do I believe that we should have income equality? Absolutely not. I don't. Doesn't work. I mean, now you're getting into areas of socialism and the tenets of socialism in a socialistic society, and I don't agree with that at all. I mean, that's a whole other topic too that I really can talk about, but I am completely against that idea, going towards like a Bernie Sanders idea of income equality. I don't believe that's true. Somebody like me, who went to school for many, many years and got myself in debt, several $100,000 to be able to earn my law degree. I don't believe that the income should be distributed equally for somebody who decided maybe not to get an education and not to pursue a certain career path. I don't think it makes sense. It doesn't work.
Do you think that there is somewhere, though, a happy medium between what some see as, kind of extreme inequality and, the Bernie Sanders socialism? Do you think there is something government can do that, from a conservative perspective, to deal with the issue?
I'm going to have to, could government do something? They could, but my response is going to be, I don't believe it's government's role. That's not government's role. We have individual liberty. That's how our country was set up. Our country was set up that, we are responsible for our, for what we do and how we live our lives. And government should not be encroaching upon that. So government shouldn't be telling us, shouldn't be in control of certain areas of our lives. Now, I know that there's laws out there. We have minimum wage laws and, there's other things. I mean, those are different issues, but for the purposes of this, as a whole, I don't know as if it's government's job.
What does the phrase "make America great again" mean to you?
What that means to me is I would never say anything negative about one of the leaders of our country. I don't care if they were Democrat or they were Republican, if they were progressive or they were conservative. They're the president of the United States, and I've always respected the position of the president of the United States. So you go back to any of my Twitter or Facebook or social media back when Obama was president, you're not hearing me say anything negative, but I disagreed with his policies. And one of the things that I disagreed with was, I believe he was on for 8 years. He was on an apology tour for the rest of the country for America. He seemed to always have been apologizing for Americans, and whether it had to do with trade, whether it had to do with another aspect of the economy, whether it had to do with, intervention or, social areas, economic areas, it didn't matter. Throughout the whole country, throughout the world, he seemed to always be on an apology tour. And so making America great again after 8 years of Obama, where it didn't seem like he was always putting Americans first. So to me, we need to have America first, the American first agenda. Not that we're better than anybody else, but we have to start protecting the people within our borders. We're not a nation if we're not protecting the people who live within our borders.
Coming into the 2016 election, Americans enjoyed probably the greatest standard of living on earth in history. Unemployment was below 5%, which we know it got lower, but that's still very good unemployment numbers. Americans enjoyed greater choices in what they could do with their lives, with what they could buy, with how they could spend their money. More Americans felt were gaining new senses of freedom and a growing sense of individual liberty. So one question I've always had is, why wasn't America great in 2016?
I guess I could disagree with a lot of those things that you said. When you said we were gaining individual liberty, well, I didn't see it that way. I thought we were losing individual liberty. I can give you an example talking about healthcare. When that Affordable Care Act was passed, I work for myself, so I don't have an employer that's paying my health insurance. And at the time, I had kids in school. I'm paying for a kid in college. I'm just, I only make enough money to pay my bills. I don't have any extra, and I got to letter on right after January 1st, maybe January 2nd, January 3rd, wherever that Monday was, get a letter in the mail that says, pursuant to the Affordable Care Act, your premium has now gone up $800 a month. $800 a month. That's what my premium went up. That's not. I had no choice in the matter. If I wanted to keep my kids and myself insured medically, I had to comply with it. I wasn't given, more choice and more freedom. I look under what we're doing here, living in New York State under Cuomo. I look at our freedoms being taken away. They're being chipped at, our constitutional freedoms. So I guess I would have to fundamentally disagree with that statement that during the 2016 elections, to me, socialism was knocking at the door, which government wanted their hand in everything. And I'm a believer of individual liberty, more freedoms, less government, small government. Small government is what I believe in. And I was looking at it as the government was growing under the Obama administration. And again, I'm not only blaming it on one party, because I think both parties get comfortable and they both contribute to the growth. So, I think we have to make America great again by, getting rid of all these career politicians that aren't serving you, and they're not serving me, and they're not serving my kids. And I don't know what kind of country we're going to have left if the regular people, us regular people, don't step up and take our country back. That's the way that I see it.
So earlier you talked about co-equal government, and we've heard the president say that it's the decision of the president, not the governors, say, to reopen aspects of the economy or what's going on in local communities, that he could override the governors on their decisions, that Article 2 gives him all the power. Do you think you would have a role in Congress in reining in overreach of executive power?
So I'm hearing what the president said, and the president basically said that he is giving that power, that the states have that power, that each governor has control and authority over his or her state. And so that's why you have a governor out of South Dakota who didn't close down her state. And then you have a governor here in New York State that closed down everything. And then you have a governor in Florida who, he had somewhere in between, and look at how low their numbers are, and their economy didn't tank. So the president, maybe early on he may have said something to that effect, but when all is said and done, the president was telling each governor, I am not in control of your state. You know your state, you know your people, you know what's best for the protection. And so it's up to you. And that's the way that our government was founded upon. The federal government is supposed to be limited in their powers, and the states are supposed to, a lot of the things that go on are supposed to actually be in the purview and jurisdiction of the states. So I think that the president gave it back. Some of the governors didn't like it. Ours doesn't like it. But because, my personal opinion is they want the federal funds. But as far as limited government for the national government, the governors are supposed to be in charge of what's going on in our state.
President Trump was talking about, he wanted churches to reopen, and he said if the governors didn't do it, he would override them. Is that an overreach of his authority?
Well, I don't know if that would hold up. I mean, I know that was a statement, but I also think that that's a constitutional issue, which is why most churches across New York State opened up this past Sunday on Pentecost Sunday. They didn't care what the governor said. They opened up. And, I went to a couple press conferences with some of the pastors that had indicated that that was their intention. And constitutionally, I don't think that Cuomo can keep the churches shut.
If elected, one of the first big challenges you might face as a member of Congress is the economy and getting the economy going again. What's your economic plan?
Yeah, for sure. That's been at the forefront of my mind right now. For the past 10 months campaigning, we were living in, the best economy with the lowest unemployment. Minority unemployment was at its lowest. Women, they were at their highest employment ever in the history of, the United States. So we were looking at such a strong economy. And now, of course, COVID hits and then the economy tanks. So we have got to restart it. I'm not going to be one to say that, we're going to be in a recession or a depression or anything like that. I think that we have a president who's a businessman, and we put our trust in him for the last 3 years to build up the economy. And I think nobody could attack those numbers, because facts are facts and the numbers are there. So I think he could do it again. He could restart the economy again. I don't really think it's government's job. I think it is absolutely going to be in the hands. We got to be looking to the private sector. We have to look at the innovativeness and ingenuity of Americans, the American people, and our, going back to Jack Kemp, the American ideal. He always talked about the American ideal when he was our congressman. And we have to go back to all of that. I think we have got to let Americans, we have got to let the private sector really work to restart and rebuild our economy. And the first step in that is we got to get these open, because our small businesses here in New York 27, we're not in a big city. We don't have New York City. We don't have the city of Rochester. We don't have the city of Buffalo. So our district is made up of small businesses, little mom and pop shops, and we have got to get them open, or it's going to be much more difficult the longer we stay closed. One other thing I'd want to add is going to that with the economy. I think that part of it is we do have to hold China accountable and keep our jobs here. It's going to be important to keep our jobs here for us to be able to restart our economy.